On today's foray into madness incarnate, we'll be diving deep below the waters of a little game we all know and love, Subnautica. A game that's really special to me, and we'll even touch on why the sequel may not have worked out nearly as well. We're going to dive into the deepest trenches of the human condition today in our journey of hope and discovery. A hope that is key to Subnautica's success, and how its absence stunted the sequel. But as to why that is, well, you just have to keep watching. Let's dive in. Subnautica is an open-world, part survival, part exploration, part horror game set in the distant future. We're a lowly employee of the gigantic megacorporation Altera, aboard the Aurora, a transstellar space cruiser. Our journey, however, is cut short as we crash into a previously unexplored water world, and it's our task to survive and find a way off this little rock, uncovering a massive mystery to be solved along the way. Now, this broadly dumbs down the rich atmosphere and gameplay loop of Subnautica, but for those of you still with us who haven't played the game yet, it's a good starting point. A starting point to go play this awe-inspiring experience? Yeah, you. Pause this goddamn video and go play the game. What are you waiting for? It's so fucking good, and I'm going to spoil most of it in this video. Please don't rob yourself of this. I'll still be here when you're finished, forever paused in a state of anticipatory excitement, eagerly awaiting your thoughts in the comments, maybe a little praise for changing your life. I'll wait. Are they gone? Whew, good. Because this shit's gonna sound crazy without playing the game first. Hell, maybe it'll sound crazy anyways, but here it is all anyway. Now, I'm something of a horror game fanatic myself, and even my desensitized ass found Subnautica pants-shittingly terrifying at times, so that's the bit we're mainly gonna focus on today. Correction, I still find Subnautica terrifying even on subsequent playthroughs, so you know they got something right. But what makes the game not explicitly marketed as a horror title so freaking scary? Well, that, in my humble high school diploma opinion, is the unknown. Oh wow, a YouTuber explaining how Subnautica leverages the fear of the unknown. I've totally never seen this before, I hear you all say in unison. Well, yes, actually, you haven't, because I'm coming at this from a different angle. I'm gonna, pause for dramatic effect, tie this into real life, and use the floweriest language known to man. Thank you, gifted and talented program. And I'll use my own anecdotal experiences and the state of the world at large. Still not convinced I'm original? Well, how about a 4-year-long disappearance of YouTube's most mentally ill niche internet microcelebrity? Isn't that a compelling mystery to solve? Aren't you just waiting on bated breath for the answer to this enigma? Before we can explain how Subnautica leverages the unknown, we need to look at why the unknown is such a potent source of human fear. Perhaps even the most potent for many, if not all of us. Alright, now, sit your ass down and lock in, because we're about to get metaphorical up in here. Oh, and I apologize in advance for being an unfunny, insufferable video essayist who desperately attempts to appear far smarter than they actually are. Emerging from the wet darkness, we are propelled into a world of firsts, of great unknowns set to be conquered. If we're lucky, a friendly hand guides us through the perils of this strange new place, full of lights and sounds and colors. We take our first steps, mirroring our paternal mentors, but as time begins to meander, slipping through our fingers like loose mud, the playful veil of curiosity begins to rip at the seams. Cracks and tears split down its velvety fabric, and we find not wonders or enticing secrets, but instead an inky shadow, one that swirls and licks outwards towards us with crooked fingers and gnashing teeth. The illusion is shattered, and the dark reality of life is borne naked before us, ugly and bitter. What lays behind the curtain isn't an endless expanse of opportunity, bright and sunny, but rather a twisting network of dark tunnels pocked with craggy openings which may birth any number of horrid beasts and terrible frights. We are thrust across the threshold where the void swallows us whole. A door unseen is slammed behind us as the darkness engulfs our new reality. It's a fate inevitable for all but a lucky few. So, we tighten our belts, lace our boots, and embark into the darkness. However, looks can be deceiving. While many doors in this hellish darkness lead to horrors beyond comprehension, others creak on their weathered hinges, revealing the scent of home, a chortle of gentle laughter, and the sight of a friendly face. We face fear all our lives with every new chapter and uncharted day. Yet every day is filled with little victories and conquered mountains. Over time, our collected experience grows into a thick cerebral lexicon, weathering mountains to grassy slopes and ravines to dimpled valleys. The unfamiliar becomes an old friend, welcomed with open arms in our hump of inside jokes and jolly greetings. The new becomes the old and homey as our worlds grow smaller and smaller. This is not to say that no new shadowy crevices round the bend of time. By the later years of adulthood, our tool belt is fleshed out and brimming with knowledge plentiful enough to illuminate the darkness, even if the light is dim. Reality's many rules and expectations have gone and passed, narrowing down what may or may not be obscured in the shadows. Childhood is full of wonders, whimsy, and curiosity, and adulthood is full of shaky truths and fettered imagination. This is why we seek out art, to help ignite the flames of curiosity burned away by the winds of time, to find magic in the world once more. I think this is especially obvious when looking at the staggering number of millennials and older Gen Z who enjoy cartoons and films whose primary target demographic are younger children to preteens. Some topical examples include the likes of Bluey, Adventure Time, Gravity Falls, Harry Potter, SpongeBob, and countless others. This is not to demean anyone who partakes in these interests, especially not since I also enjoy most of the listed IPs and many, many more. It's unquestionably a powerful tool to reclaim childhood ripped away too early or escape from the horrific reality of humanity circa 2024. However, in my personal opinion, this nostalgic yearning for an innocent snapshot in time is far from the most effective way to achieve the aforementioned feelings. This is of course entirely subjective, as our own individual stories and preferences dictate our desired form of emotional healing. Some enjoy romance, others fantasy, still more action, superheroes, and science fiction. But to me, none are as visceral as horror. Horror cuts the chains binding our imagination, revealing a snapping maw and twisting flesh. It leverages our own traumas and curiosities as fuel for its wretched machine. It captures the chaotic and uncontrollable world and puts the power to conquer it in your hands and your hands alone. But the genre of horror transcends the subjective. After all, fear is arguably the most powerful emotion. Love is really the only other one brought into the conversation. Horror, for as long as the medium has existed, has held humanity in a death grip in the most literal fashion. Religion has leveraged horror and unknown to bind people to its will with concepts of demons, hells, and wretched spirits. Tragedy and dark taboos dominate news media, causing ratings to soar. Politicians leverage fear to sway voters, and fear forces us to remain a cog in the capitalist machine. Fear informs nearly every decision every single human being will ever make. It is the proverbial devil on the shoulder, whispering its horrid visions of the future into our ears. This is why the genre of horror within art is so powerful. Almost every story cannot escape without a little horror for good measure. Red Dead Redemption 2, Arthur's struggle with tuberculosis, and the slow crushing of seemingly unshakable series of family bonds. Spec Ops: The Line with its infamous white phosphorus scene. The impending obliteration of Majora's Mask. Outer Wilds and the cosmic horror of the feckless search for knowledge in a cold universe facing its end. Even Call of Duty cannot escape the grasp of horror with perhaps the most talked about scene in gaming. I'll give you a hint, it rhymes with tomato concussion. And this doesn't include the prominence of horror games or horror-adjacent games which frequently make of-all-time lists across the internet. Horror is undeniably powerful. It evokes something deep within our little lizard brains which can connect across language, age, gender, sexuality, and race. And it serves as a potent reflection of the world around us. We live in very troubling times. Every day when we open up our phones or talk to our friends, it seems the entire world is on fire. Sometimes it literally is. The rights of LGBT people, women, people of color, and indigenous peoples hang in the balance. The economy is in shambles. The average Joe and Joette, like you or me, can't even afford food for ourselves, let alone for those we hold dearest. We're in the midst of a mental health and loneliness crisis, especially among young men. Really, the scale is set and any amount of pressure could tip the balance either way. There's a non-zero chance this whole thing we call the modern era could go up in smoke, or hopefully, this could be yet another false alarm in a series of hundreds over the last century. But our brains are funny little creatures. That non-zero chance starts to look a hell of a lot scarier the more we look at it. I mean, give me the choice of a 0% chance I'm hit by a bus tomorrow and a 1 in a trillion shot. I'm probably going to feel a whole lot better about the 0% chance. It doesn't make sense how our brains warp reality in such ways. It's toxic and corrodes our determination every second we spend in its awful presence. It's a function that can be weaponized, taken advantage of, and drives us to do some seriously crazy shit. It's scary just how corrupting fear can be. Like a hardy weed sown into our souls that grows and grows no matter what we try to do to stop it. Before you know it, that fear has taken the reins and informs every single decision you make on a daily basis, often without you even realizing it. I mean, we all have that 170-something boomer relative hopped up on enough lead to kill a horse screaming about how immigrants are secretly controlling the entire country and trying to replace everyone like some synth in Fallout 4. I think a lot of people mistake that reaction to be pure malicious hatred for a minority group and nothing else. That sometimes is the case, but I think for a vast majority of bigots, it's fear that drives that anger and hatred. They completely otherize and dehumanize the target group, instead treating them like some malevolent hive mind, and not what they are, individual humans with lives just as complex as theirs. Take a look at far-right movements both online in the here and now, but also throughout history. Many, if not all of these groups often portray the groups they target as some divine evil to be feared. The Nazis viewed Jewish art and media as inherently corrupting, as if it contained evil dark magic that would take hold of the feeble Aryan mind. I mean, they literally set up entire museums to display the work of Jewish artists alongside placards explaining its degeneracy. These were essentially the Nazi equivalent to freak shows. It provided a place for them to laugh and gawk at quote-unquote human degeneracy. The framing of the Enterte Kunst exhibit was a deliberate tool which the party used to further fuel reactionary thought against the target group. The white supremacist slaveholders and supporters of Jim Crow policy, and I kid you not, used to fear black men as virile rapists hell-bent on cuckolding their wives and daughters. No, seriously. This was one of the primary reasons why, during a lynching, a person was often castrated. These lynchings were often triggered based off of rumors or suspicions of a black man fucking a white woman. And funnily enough, well, not funnily, it's quite sad actually, xenophobes and racists in the modern era often take a page out of both the Nazis and the white supremacists of Confederate America's book. Go to any place like 4chan or any other similar right-wing dominated forum. These places are filled to the fucking brim with interracial cuckolding porn, and fears over minorities of all shapes coming in to replace them and cuck their race out of existence. This is all a fear-based mentality. While I'm sure a good number of us would be angered by our partner sleeping with another person, it's not normal to sit and brood over the prospect that it might happen, let alone by some nebulous force or group hell-bent on specifically luring your partner to commit adultery. It's even more strange when you start to believe that minorities have a 20 charisma stat by default and instantly turn any pair of dry underwear soaking wet by their mere presence. Oh fuck, he's behind me, isn't he? The one and only glaring hole in my argument. No, Pedro, I'm engaged. I can't have your children. Anywho, people like this are afraid of the shadow under their bed, by the prospect of a near impossibility. Hell, I'd argue this is just as ridiculous as that whole dog pill fiasco that went down a few years ago. I would say don't Google it, but it's funny as hell and you should absolutely look it up right now and laugh at it. It's sure to brighten your day, even just a little bit. If you know, you know. You genuinely can't make this shit up. Anyways, it may seem inappropriate to compare these real-world problems and fears to the fears that we experience in media. I see it another way. No piece of entertainment is created in a vacuum, and horror is not an exception. We can often trace the roots of horror's many faces back to the time period they were created. You have films like Silence of the Lambs, Sleepaway Camp, and Dressed to Kill, which respond directly out of the gay panic era. Each depict crude and demeaning stereotypes of queer culture under their respective villains and stories. The slasher craze of the 80s and 90s was fueled by the emerging concept of stranger danger, where someone from your town or neighborhood could pose a significant threat to the community at large. Worse still, these villains are often portrayed as different in some way from the townsfolk. They might be loners, suffer from mental illness, or live alternate lifestyles. Michael Myers had direct ties to the occult and Satanism. Jason Voorhees was a mentally handicapped child before he turned bane of all horny teenagers looking to get their rocks off at summer camp. Buffalo Bill of Silence of the Lambs was a cross-dresser. All of this is to say that the mindset of the wider world around horror often plays a key role in influencing the media of the era. The fear of the unknown stranger, cultures different to ours and unknown to us, and alternative lifestyles we're not privy to create the perfect canvas to paint horror onto. After all, most people don't fit into every single one of these categories, nor do they interact with the other all that often, if at all. When people are made to think about this, it can create a sense of fear of what's behind the curtain. As I said before, until we investigate, it really could be anything at all. To someone not immersed in queer culture, for example, who's to say trans people don't actually want to be able to intrude in bathrooms to prey on women and all that malarkey? Whoa, where did that come from, right? Woke culture war in my Subnautica video essay? Redonkulous, right? But I promise this will become relevant later, so until then, let's carry on. Think of it as a little mystery for you to solve. The clues are here, you just have to crack the case. If the answer isn't obvious already. Now, obviously, this isn't true, but because we've created such an insular culture, the exposure to these ideas often simply doesn't occur and thus doesn't give anything for people to work off of. And this allows fear to spread its roots. It dehumanizes the other. If the other isn't something you regularly encounter, then the concept of their lives is nothing but a blank canvas to you. Who's to say all these sinister things don't go on out there in the world? You have nothing to draw from other than what the television tells you, so it's easy to fall prey to these irrational fears. Even if the fear being pushed isn't all that rational. Using the trans people in the bathroom example, I think it's quite obvious that if a man wanted to prey on a woman in the bathroom, he wouldn't go through all the effort of dolling himself up, injecting hormones, or having surgical procedures done. After all, the bathroom doesn't have a magic force field preventing anyone not man or woman enough from entering it. If he chooses to commit a heinous act in the restroom, he'll just walk in and do it. I doubt somebody willing to rape minds committing the social faux pas of being in the wrong bathroom. But this mindset of irrational fear isn't irreversible. Even something like knowing a queer person at work or school, or having a black friend can go a long way in helping humanize the subgroup in people's eyes. Providing proper education on different cultures, LGBT history, etc. can also begin that normalization in incoming generations. Even things as small as positive minority representation and normalization in media helps to humanize people of all different backgrounds. Now, of course, this won't turn someone into a progressive good boy overnight, but it can often be a way to get the proverbial foot in the door. This isn't a problem we fix in a day, it's something that's probably going to take a handful of generations to sort out for good. But every day we make progress, no matter how small it may seem sometimes. Acceptance of transgender people is at an all-time high, even if our detractors have gotten a hell of a lot louder. The BLM protests made massive strides of awareness of the issues people of color face on a daily basis in America. Climate change is finally a hot-button issue, even if conservatives around the globe are screaming that it's fake news. It's still getting press coverage, and more people than ever support climate reforms. Climate change was hardly ever even brought up 20 years ago unless your name was Al Gore. Now it's at the cultural forefront, talked about in every presidential debate with articles, studies, op-eds, etc. coming out on the daily by the hundreds. So why does this matter? And what the hell does this mean for Subnautica? And more importantly, what in the ecological fuck zone does this have to do with my multi-year disappearance from YouTube? Well, I'm glad you asked, me from the not-so-distant past. It means... Subnautica is one of the single most effective horror games I have ever played, and a good 70% of the game isn't even horror in any aspect, without genuinely having thalassophobia, and it does all this while maintaining a flawless theme, which seems to be in direct contradiction with the source of horror itself. And what cryptic thing is Subnautica attempting to act as an allegory for? I don't fucking know. The ocean is really fucking scary or something like that? But in all reality, like all art, Subnautica can mean an infinite amount of things when viewed through your own little personal lenses. Now, like most art, it does try and point us in a few different directions, but that's not what this video is about. It's actually about having an excuse to infodump on strangers. I discovered Subnautica during an extremely crucial time in my life. I'd argue I wouldn't be the same person today without it. That may sound overdramatic, but just bear with me for a moment as we wind back the clock to April of 2016. Where little old me was deciding to check out this cool little indie game that popped up on my Steam page. And so, I sold a Damascus gut knife from my CSGO inventory and decided to purchase the game. Little did I know how much of an impact the next week would have on me, and just how much that knife would go up in price. See, I was 3/4 through my sophomore year of high school. The stretch between the start of 9th and the summer before my junior year was the single loneliest point in my entire life. When I say I had 0 friends, I mean that, not being overdramatic whatsoever. I genuinely had, well, 0 friends. I used to go to an empty stairwell to eat luncheon at school. I opted to walk home by myself instead of trying to take the bus. I never saw anyone outside of school, and most days I didn't speak a single word in school. I'd just get home and retreat to my bedroom to pass time with games. The only thing I looked forward to was getting home and escaping into that digital world. But it was nothing more than that, simply an escape. These days were mostly filled with Counter-Strike and Gmod. There was no serious introspection or anything, simply distract my brain long enough to go to bed. Life was just peachy. Well, no, it wasn't actually. A storm was brewing within me, staved off and allowed to percolate deep within my chest. Out of sight, out of mind. The cracks slowly began to appear. Emotional outbursts, slowly losing interest in everything I loved. Games were no longer fun anymore. In fact, nothing was. My grades slipped as I spaced out in class. The world around me had become a blur of muted colors and muffled sounds. I began to have particularly unsavory thoughts of death and pain, bordering on fantasy and obsession. That hurricane continued to gather strength, swirling and churning, its gnashing teeth eating away at me. It threatened to pull me under. Hell, one night for a moment, it did. But then a new game appeared on my Steam page, a game about the ocean. It seemed cool enough after a glance on its Steam page, so I sold some skins and picked it up. That decision would forever alter the course of my life. From the moment of the game's onset, I was in love. I'm sure you're all well aware of the beautiful intricacies of Subnautica's design. The feeling of exploration and discovery as each trip out from the base uncovers more and more of an increasingly alien world. The little panics of racing back up to the surface for oxygen. The jump scare of a crash fish. Slowly accumulating new recipes and new avenues for exploration. Although it still was but a distraction. But minute by minute, something was beginning to change. Subnautica is an inherently lonely and isolating game, and not just on the surface. The game constantly hints at other survivors, that somebody else might have survived the crash, somewhere tucked away in a life pod elsewhere in the crater, but every distress signal you come across comes up with nothing. It's almost like you're chasing echoes or ghosts of other people, like hearing a conversation through a wall. And for someone dealing with such isolation and loneliness, it was borderline devastating. To time after time be confronted by the exact thing that plagued my life every single day. Those echoes of other people were like passing conversations between friends in the hallway, or hearing a few words uttered by a lunch table full of smiling people while you sit alone. It's a feeling that nearly made me stop playing altogether. It was viscerally uncomfortable to be reminded of my predicament time and time again. See, I'm a runner and an avoider. When things give me anxiety, I have a hard time confronting that. I instead try to escape, to distract myself or remove myself from the situation. I am so glad I pushed through those feelings while playing Subnautica. My playthrough marked the very first time I used art for its most powerful purpose, to feel something, to process my own thoughts. It was the first time I turned inward in a dance of self-reflection and acknowledged the feelings I had inside. It's the moment I truly fell in love with art in all of its forms. And the best part is, Subnautica is only one of thousands of times I've had the privilege to do this in my life at this point. Hell, I've gotten to a point where nearly every game I play, movie I watch, album I listen to, and painting I take in is filtered through this exact lens, trying to find personal meaning and introspection. It's a moment to ground myself and reflect on the world and my own thoughts, feelings, and values. It really just feels incredible. One I'd argue which is completely unmatched. It's made me so deeply appreciate the world, life, death, and my own place here in this little blue rock. It made me fearless and ready to accept the march of time as it moves through me. Not to say I still don't have worries and bad days, but it's allowed me to roll with the punches a little better and work through some truly harrowing times in my life. But facing this isolation wasn't even the only knowledge Subnautica channeled into my ego. It wasn't some new realization or growth of character, it was the recognition of what I already had within me. I thought I was so isolated because I was a weirdo, that I was too weak to stand out against the shining personalities around me. Admittedly, the former is true, but what I didn't know is how much that would decimate the latter. It takes courage to be yourself, to be unapologetically cringe and weird in the face of a society which presses us all to conform, to become cogs in the machine, interchangeable parts, made to consume the same things, to police each other out of fear of being marked ourselves. It's robbed us of our individuality. It robbed me of mine for so long. It kills you to relegate yourself to the background, to do everything you can to not stand apart from the crowd. You begin to believe that the things that make you, well, you, are somehow wrong. We hide our passion, our obsessions, we smash dreams to pursue things which are useful rather than what will make us happy. How many times have we heard stories of people giving up on passions because it just won't pay the bills? In that time beneath the waves, I found myself, but more importantly, I found the courage to wear that on my sleeve. In just 7 days, I dropped the mask I used to fit in. I abandoned playing football, a dream my peers and father made up for me. I dropped the people I shared superficial connections with. I stopped taking ridicule from those who saw through my disguise. I joined up with my high school robotics team, found new friends, started dressing different. In only 6 months, I was entirely unrecognizable. But the irony is that this was here all along. I had already lost years of my life to conformity, but I wouldn't let it control me any longer. There comes a point in every playthrough where you come to the edge of a cliff. The sloping shallows and sunny plateaus abruptly end in a precipice of dark water. Any number of things might lie beyond the threshold, but the nature of these moments stop us from gleaming anything to help moor us to an answer. It becomes an internal struggle with fear. To proceed is to truly step into the void, to face dangers unseen. But to back away is to stop our progress, to forever remain stuck in our current ways. It can be genuinely terrifying to proceed, but at some point, we must make the journey. Standing up and facing that fear is the essence of hope. It lives within us, and we all have to dig deep to find it. Now, stick with me here, because shit's about to get even more incomprehensible, and to be frank, kind of stuffy. Subnautica is a descent into unbridled madness. Every point of progression is deeper than the last. The sun fades away, growing dim before vanishing altogether. Our reliance on the air above and the light from the planet's distant star wears thin. Only machines can sustain us at this point. The shining beacon of the Cyclops anchors us to this mortal coil. We descend into an ancient graveyard of creatures seemingly larger than what should be possible within reality. The planet swallows us into its stomach, where the bones of these gargantuan demons sit bleached by time in the acidic brine of its gullet. The planet has devoured them and digested them through the sands of time. From the moment the water turns from midnight to acidic green, we feel less welcome than we ever have before. It's like we're trespassing in a place not meant for our eyes to see. Every notion of what can and cannot be is thrown out. All our knowledge from before this moment could have never prepared us for this. At this point, we feel that there's no turning back, and so we proceed, quietly humming along further into the stony bowels. We pass all manner of malevolent creature, most with a certain proclivity to violence. Gone are the small creatures and even medium-sized ones who do not wish us any harm. Nearly everything here lashes out at its surroundings. No more are the passive creatures who we marveled at. In their place are what can only be described as demons. Horrors and perversions of biology unlike anything that came before. Translucent eels with long pointed teeth lash out at anything that moves. And a great glowing snake which seems to devour anything in its sights. We escape the biome, our vessel sparking and charred by internal fires. Quite frankly, less relieved to realize that the only way out is back through that. We round a corner as the eerie green fades into an otherworldly blue, where a tree sits emitting its ethereal light. It's like an ancient god, glowing with divine light. What should be a reprieve is instead deeply unsettling in the most beautiful way imaginable. It stands there, as if to beckon us into the afterlife, the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. How such beauty could come to be so deep into the volcano's crust is a mystery. It only adds to its almost paranormal presence. Here the river of brine bottoms out, somehow pacified here in the Ghost Tree Cove. The stinging brine no longer harms us, and its green coloration has faded into a milky white, as if it were just a cloud or a whisper of dense fog. I've always had a deep fascination with the little sanctuary here at the end of the tunnel, but that feeling cannot last forever. Again, we find ourselves at the edge of a cliff, needing to proceed deeper to continue our journey. We sink further into hell itself. Gone is the uneasy safety of the cove above. Molten rock meets water in a seemingly impossible display of celestial rage. The environment defies all predefined notions of what can and cannot exist. It feels as though we've somehow been pulled into an alternate reality with different laws than that of our own. Beasts more resemblant of mythology than biology roam the blistering waters of hell. Great dragons, 100 meters long, spit fire at any wayward soul unfortunate enough to be damned to these depths, like how Cerberus guards the gates of Hades. It's here where we meet the furthest point from any man or comfort of society. 100 meters beneath the waves, past the peepers and waving kelp, 100 more beneath the reefs and forests. 100 beyond the milky twilight, where the reapers scream out in the empty blue. 100 further beneath the abyssal trenches, down and down past the alien crab squids. 100 more past the ancient burial grounds, where the ghost leviathan stalks its prey, and still double that entire journey before we find ourselves at the bottom of the crater. The place we've come to rest behind only inches of steel. Here the planet is ferociously alive, seemingly older than the universe. It's something primal, unmeant to be seen by human eyes. It's an almost ethereal sight, as beautiful it is horrific, not too dissimilar to the ghost tree now hundreds of meters above us. Ancient forces collide, water versus fire, both locked in an eternal struggle. Over the lake of molten rock sits a long-forgotten architect site, and so, despite the danger, the siren song lures us deeper, to our journey's end. But what drove us this far into the depths? Was it mere pursuit of gamified objective? A compelling story? Curiosity and awe? Well, yes. But it's something more than that. Hope. Hope drove us this deep down below the surface. Hope that the spoils of this expedition will finally tip the scales in our favor. Hope that answers lie here in the depths. This mirrors real life more than you know. It's that pesky little indomitable human spirit rising up and taking the reins. It drives us forward through the horrors in search of a brighter future. It's almost arrogant, the way we trudge forward through it all. But if it's arrogance, then it's one of the gosh darn most beautiful things I've ever seen. Earlier when I said fear is the most powerful emotion, I lied. That title belongs to hope. You think fear gets us to do crazy shit? Well, let's talk about hope. Hope is a total dissolution of the self. It will drive us into certain death if it means victory for ourselves and those around us. Hope defies evolution. It defies everything. I might argue that's what sets us apart from the brethren species we share this planet with, but who knows? Maybe the indomitable canine spirit is all around us, just under our noses. But hope is a finicky thing. It can be hard to come by, at least until conditions are just right for it to blossom. It's the orchid of emotions, so to speak. Unfortunately, our world isn't full of hope. It's an awful shitty place, full of even worse people. At every clearing of sky, a storm gathers on the horizon. We pass through eye after eye, and yet we all hope, we all dream. Because hope doesn't rely on seeing an end to the hurricane, on knowing that the skies will clear for good. Hope is something the world breaks. It wraps its cruel hand around its throat, crushing it, separating vertebrae from nerve. And yet through it all, we find a breath of air when all seems lost. Remember when going for a drive on the highway meant coming home with a dynasty of smashed bugs plastered to the front of your car? When was the last time that happened? We aren't speeding towards the next mass extinction event. It's already begun. How about those giant snowstorms that would roll in the northern US, canceling school for days? With snowdrifts so tall you could carve little hideouts into them for snowball fights. Flowers are blooming in Antarctica. We are hurtling down the bad timeline at a rapid pace, and it seems there's nothing to stop it. Nothing that is except hope. We make hope deep inside. From damp wood, we create a roaring fire. It's not something to find or glean from our reality. It's manufactured in our souls, and it's what burns a light in this dark little place. It's no mistake that hope often comes from the deepest recesses of human darkness. When we are at the apex of our own suffering, our potential is greater than we can ever imagine. No, I have journeyed through some dark fucking shit. So dark that I call dark blue just blue. But I don't think it's a coincidence that almost exclusively at points in my life where I've kicked my ass into gear and started fucking living has started from the very last ring of my own hell. And now, when shit just fucking sucks, but I know I could fall a little deeper, I just stagnate. I mean that in the most literal fashion. You could hold a revolver to my brow and I wouldn't even fucking flinch. Not in some cool, tortured, poetic way, with steeled resolve and immense courage, but with nothing but the shrug of a shoulder and a rollover in bed. I meet the world with utter indifference. Nothing brings me joy or solace. Hours blur to days, which stretch into weeks. Time passes through my fingers. Every single day starts and ends the same, without emotion or even pain to stimulate me. In my eyes, it's worse than the suffering. To suffer is to feel alive, to feel human, even if the suffering hurts. At least it's something. At least I'm not some ghost haunting my own apartment. I can channel that pain into something material, into art and poetry, into thoughts, into connections. A pit can be climbed while a void is endless in every direction. Most days I long for the pit. Hope is a ladder to climb, not a guiding light through the endless. We often joke about the indomitable human spirit, but god damn if it isn't truly alive and well within all of us. If humanity is good at one thing and one thing alone, that thing is determination and perseverance when all is lost. This isn't at all to say that in order to climb out you have to dig until bedrock, or that hope will turn your life around in a day. We often see hope as this monumental force. I'm even hyping it up like that myself right now. We associate it with rebellions, acts of honorable defiance, and the last bastion of life for struggles of human decency. And while yes, hope is absolutely fundamental to those things, it can also be a much smaller influence in our interpersonal struggles. Sometimes hope just looks like getting out of bed after a month-long rot sesh, or doing the dishes after you've neglected them for weeks, or reaching out for help in a rough patch. It isn't defined by how important an action is on a societal scale. Hope is simply looking towards the future with a sense of optimism and burning desire for change and for good to bloom. And that lends itself to struggles both big and small. When you're depressed as hell and all seems lost, finding those little moments and actions to defy that feeling of being lost makes your ladder just a little bit taller, even if only by a splinter of wood. But what is a ladder but a collection of millions of splinters fused together? The more little things we do to get out of that pit, the more momentum builds. Simply getting out of bed turns into showering more regularly, into getting back in the swing of brushing your teeth, into tidying our rooms, into cooking ourselves a nice meal, into reaching out to a therapist, into making changes in our lives to strengthen our resolve against another episode. All that is to say, don't blame yourself for having bad days, or bad weeks, or months, or years. Don't talk down on yourself if it feels like you're not making progress quickly, because every little act of defiance against the beast of depression or anxiety or OCD or any other struggle we find ourselves having is a massive victory. Find those days where you have a little bit of energy and take life by the fucking reins by doing these small things, because they make a far greater difference than you will ever know. Well, you will know, just future you will know. You get the point. Think of it, like a playthrough of Subnautica. We need to do certain big things to complete the game, like build the Cyclops, Seamoth, and Prawn suit, upgrade our vehicles, upgrade our gear, build a base, explore for new blueprints, build a storage room for our materials, but none of that is possible without collecting our first titanium or scanning our first blueprint. We can't simply drop in and manifest the rocket and cure to the Kara. These things take time spent amassing a whole lot of smaller goals and completing them. Life is really the same way. You can't become successful, well-adjusted, and totally happy overnight. All these things take time and effort expended on the little things that make the big things possible. So start small and dream big. This cycle and emotional metaphor is what's so key to Subnautica. We go deeper and deeper into Tartarus for a reason, not just for curiosity or to fulfill some objective, but because, like Dante in his Inferno, we hope that the only way out of this hell is through. We amass a mini empire of small goals to complete this one bigger goal, a mini empire made up of many things that become big. This is what Below Zero lacked. It's not that there was anti-hope in this game, that it was too dark and morbid. It's that there was no sense of perseverance in gathering hope. The mystery of what happened to Sam isn't really compelling. The answer is lacking, and Robin, her own sister, doesn't even seem to care all that much. It's essentially the main reason that should be driving Robin to be here on the planet, and it's met with that shrug of indifference, like she's stagnating on those bad weeks where I'm laying in bed. There just aren't any stakes at all, and even Alan being in her head is nothing but an annoyance to Robin. There's no ill side effects of uploading second consciousness into her brain. Alan isn't solely observing her own sense of self and independence. She isn't fading. Nothing. There's no suffering to be had. She just kind of doesn't like Alan, and that's it. Well, at least until all of a sudden at the end of the game, when despite no building of that relationship, she's all of a sudden like besties with him. If you want a perfect example of how to do this dynamic right, take a look at Cyberpunk. Despite that game's shortfallings, which have been largely made up for at this point, but that's another video, that aspect of it, the story and the stakes of Silverhand being in V's head and what that's going to do to them, it drives you forward. It creates this sense of dread and unease, and it gives you something to hope for. You race against the clock. It's what pushes the game forward, and Below Zero just kind of fumbled the bag here in this respect. It's just the most game that I've ever played. Like, it's kind of just riding the coattails of knowing what we should be doing from the first game. It almost feels contextless, like we're just kind of here doing a thing, and everything is marked for us, so we just keep pushing forward towards those markers. For the most part, there's no environmental storytelling. We do find some kind of cool wrecks, and some of those voice memos that are left behind by the old employees of this area are actually really compelling. I like these characters, they work well together, but it just sort of seems like everything has a bow put on it way too fast. Now, this could partially be because the game was completely restructured, the story was completely changed, characters were completely reworked in order to fit a new story, but at the same time, if they needed more time to work on these things and make everything feel more compelling, they should have taken it instead of releasing the game early in a state that isn't awesome. Going back to Alan, we as the player don't even get to connect with him. He's just kind of there, serving as an exposition dump to scooch us in the right direction from time to time. There are many other reasons why this doesn't work nearly as well as the OG, by the way, but they would be so off topic and make a pretty long video even longer, so they won't be included here. But don't you worry, I'm going to talk about them one of these days, just not today. There comes a point during your first foyer into Subnautica where you come to the shallow's edge. Previously, the seafloor was merely a gentle slope. Both the bottom and the surface still so comfortingly close and in view. The game wasn't hiding anything from us. We could see in all directions through water that was crystal clear. But now we've come to a cliff's edge, the first of many. Gone is that gentle slope, replaced by a sharp edge leading out into the void. Here the water goes from that tropical blue to midnight to pitch black. The lazy rays of sunlight entirely swallowed up into the depths below. It's an almost jarring transition, one which completely shakes the foundations of what we believed this game to be before. Previously, our marooning on this planet almost seemed joyous, a world unconquered for us to rule. Now, that veil of adventure has shattered, revealing the grim reality of our situation. It's often at this point where we begin to receive our first distress calls, and so we push that unease to the back of our minds and set off with newfound hope to reunite with other survivors of the crash. And yet, upon arriving at a drop pod's coordinates, we don't find them merrily floating in the water, on the water's surface like our own pod, but instead, they lie disheveled on the sea floor. Worse still, as we approach, we begin to see that something has found the survivors before we can. Clearly they were alive when we first landed, as many of the PDA entries left behind by the survivors tell us, but something has come and picked the wrecks clean of any life. Worse still, some of these PDA entries reveal that a creature did indeed stalk the survivors inside, and that hope of companionship is crushed by the world. We survived thus far on a whim. We simply were lucky enough to land in safe waters, and it seems nobody else rolled the dice nearly as well as we did. And so we returned to the cliff, seemingly more alone than ever, called to by that inky void. And we know we must answer that call, so we dive down into the depths. 200 meters reads out our PDA, then 300, then 4. At this point, we're swallowed by darkness, left to wonder if a bottom will ever come. A rhythmic grinding screams through the water, like a machine revving its horrible engine. We freeze, suspended in darkness, ears perked. Maybe the sound was just our imagination, or emanated from the wrecked Aurora not a kilometer from our position. There's the sound again, this time almost more alive than before. The hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. Could that sound have come from some kind of creature? The sea monster which claimed the lives of our fellow survivors? You try to shake off the paranoia, but your eyes can't help but dart around the darkness, half expecting a monster to come barreling at us at any moment. The noise tears through the water once more, louder than before. This is definitely coming from some terrible beastie, you think. Without a second thought, you race up back towards the surface, heart pounding in your chest as images of drowned monsters tear through your mind. A torrent of noise bellows out through the sea, so loud it seems to come from everywhere all at once. It's like the monsters right on your heels. You will yourself to swim faster and faster as the hulking shape swooshes through the water behind you. Light appears in front of you. You're almost free of these depths. 100 meters, 50, 20, 10. With a great eruption of water, you reach the surface, releasing the breath you didn't know you were holding and gasping for air. You quickly spin around, seeing if the beast was still snapping at your heels. A looming shadow sinks into the darkness from whence you came. Even after all that, you couldn't even get a look at the thing. This is what Subnautica does to leverage the unknown, and it's a series of these events. Cliff after cliff, you must dive down to progress. It's terrifying. From that first experience, it teaches you that a lack of information is something to fear. It turns you into a toy in the mouth of a rabid dog, and it's incredible. But this is what Below Zero is missing. It fails to evoke this feeling even a single time. That's why it can't meet the expectations set by its older counterpart. Okay, but what does this have to do with my disappearance from YouTube? Well, it all started with the biggest crash out of mental health I've ever had in my life. When the pandemic hit, it caused my OCD to flare up, in a way that I never thought possible. I could no longer leave the house without having a panic attack. I had trouble touching things that were outside of my bedroom. I struggled with things like touching my face without inducing panic, eating food for fear of mold or grossness from the grocery store. I lost 75 pounds in a month because of how little I could get myself to eat. I became a skeleton, every bone jutting out from my skin like some kind of monster. I had to do everything a certain number of times for fear of my world spiraling out of control. I had to take 12 sips of water every time I drank. I had to wash my hands 4 times for them to feel clean, since 4 is associated with death in certain cultures. In my brain, that's what killed anything on my hands. I had to think trains of thoughts 6 times so nothing bad would happen. Everything was a factor of 12, just because I like that number and it feels comfortable to me. Even microwaving my food had to be done for a certain length of time, no matter the outcome. 1 minute and 15 seconds, because of COD zombies for all you wondering. It was definitely a rough patch for sure. And then to cap it off, these feelings I had for so long, and then, just to cap it off, these feelings that I had for so long but were ignoring kept bubbling up within me because of how often I was left alone with my thoughts, trapped in my room. Thoughts of how much I hated my body and appearance despite being somewhat conventionally attractive. Feelings about what dynamic I wanted for myself and how I wanted my relationships to pan out. And even what clothes didn't make my skin itch. About my name. To make a long story short, I realized that I'm transgender. I was so lost that I had somehow found my real self while adrift at sea in this tumultuous time in my life. But for you guys, the timing couldn't be worse. I was about to put out the very first version of the script when all of a sudden, all I could focus on was how disgusting my voice sounded to me while editing. I just couldn't get through it, so I canned this project and moved on. But I know now it wasn't just the editing that scared me, it was you guys. I was scared of how me being trans might garner negative attention. My experiences being myself online at that point were definitely not very good. Hell, it caused me to nearly quit playing multiplayer games altogether, and I was scared that that abuse would continue in the comment section if I came out to all of you, something that I knew I had to do. And I realize now just how unfair it was to judge you all like that. I was scared of that unknown and I let that fear rule me, but I hope that you can forgive me for that. And it really doesn't help that I kept making empty promises from my return, only adding to that fear of judgment and mountain of anxiety. Every time I got close to releasing, I'd feel compelled to rewrite the script because I felt like I could do a better job with it. I'm not kidding when I say we're nearing the 20th draft of this video. Some of which made it all the way to editing and I just never uploaded them because they didn't feel right to me. But I feel good about this one this time. And if you're seeing this, it's because in my eyes, it was the one. The best I could offer at my level of experience on this topic. Now I do wish it were longer, believe it or not. There were many B-plots and little threads I cut out because they felt like they were more relevant to something else rather than the topic that I ended up going for with this video. Hell, that full breakdown of what the hell was wrong with Below Zero was just about entirely removed because it was a bit off topic. It had more to do with expectations than the unknown, which was the original core theme to this. But I think the unknown thread is much stronger here. And now we've arrived at the final point at long last. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening to me ramble on here for the last little while. It really does mean the world to me. And if you could give me a nice fat subscribe and like, that would be excellent and most appreciated. And if you have the time, some constructive feedback would truly be the most awesomest, bestest thing in the world to me right now. I want to do even better in the future. And there will be a future, don't you worry. I'm so locked in as of the last month or so. Let's talk about that future real quick. This channel is not going to be Subnautica exclusive. Not because Subnautica doesn't have enough to talk about, but because horror is my passion, and games and other forms of art in general. I want to talk about whatever I'm most passionate about at any given moment. That could just be oogling over that month's favorite game, or diving into topics much like this one where we extrapolate the greater meaning of some of our favorite pieces of media. So, to put it another way, yet another insufferable trans video essayist. Now, as for video timeline, I cannot and refuse to give promises, not after I let you guys down so many times. But I would like to share my goals with you. I want to post monthly at the very least. That is my goal. But my extra special goal is to have 2 videos out in October as a sort of peace offering for my past misgivings. And not at all because the topics of those videos both have major releases in October. While the specific topic will remain a surprise, the primary focus of these 2 videos are going to be Call of Duty Zombies, Love, Death plus Robots, and Dave the Diver for one video. I know, right? Have fun figuring out the connection there. And Silent Hill 2 for the second video. I already have a head start on those scripts, so I'm hopeful that I can get both of these out in time, but that's to be seen. It may work out to be one video October and one November, but again, I can't say that for sure. Either way, thanks again for sitting through this whole clusterfuck of a video. I'm kind of just trying to emulate the vibe that some of my favorite content creators give off with my own little flair on it. People like Jacob Geller, ContraPoints, Folding Ideas, H-Guy, and funnily enough, Technology Connections. I'm not saying that I should at all be compared to them. They are much, much better at what they do, and to be quite honest, leaps and bounds ahead of me in intelligence. They all have years of experience in these types of videos, but I am trying. And I want to keep getting better, so again, constructive feedback would be awesome if you're willing to spend a little of your ever-fleeting time down in the comments. Let me know what worked and what didn't so I can deliver the best quality possible on future videos to come. Anyways, this video has been long enough, as I'm sure you're feeling right now. So that's going to do it for me today. Again, I appreciate your support, time, and attention more than anything, guys. Subscribe for more, or else. I'm going to end with the video's original opening from several scripts ago. I think it's apt to our time together today. This has been June, signing off.